Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to take a look back at some Legends of Runeterra characters that I think have the potential merit to become League of Legends characters. Now, Legends of Runeterra has added a ton of characters to their game that started life in League of Legends. Namely, every single champion card they've released, with one exception, are characters from League of Legends. Conversely, League of Legends hasn't adopted any characters, so far that I'm aware of, into their game from Legends of Runeterra. And I think that Legends of Runeterra by this point has released a plethora of characters that are unique to their game. And part of this is because they have the ability to do non-champion tier characters, like Acoustician, for example, Seraphine's dad, who's not a champion. There's no real way for him to be a champion, but it makes sense as a Legends of Runeterra card. And it's a really neat way for us to view Runeterra, but I think that they have released some characters in the game that have the ability to be full-on champions, that I think that would totally work in League of Legends as champion designs, not only from a character perspective and a power level perspective, but also just from a mechanical perspective. I think that there are things that a Riot dev team could look at the character design and say, yeah, we can design for that, or even look at the card design and say, yeah, we can design something to represent that in our preferred genre of game versus the genre of game that they originally came out in. The same thing that the Legends of Runeterra devs are doing with League of Legends champions, taking a character like Nasus, for example, and saying, how do we mechanically represent the stacks? So either way, I wanted to go through some of my front runners for characters from Legends of Runeterra that I think could be good characters in League of Legends, starting off with Ravun, Daylight's Spear. Now, we've gotten two Lunari characters in League of Legends so far, Diana and Aphelios, so it makes sense. It only makes sense that the Solari need to catch up. Leona is all on her own, and I think Ravun, Daylight's Spear would be a really cool character to introduce. I will have all the character arts linked down in the description below, guys, so if you don't play Legends of Runeterra, you can take a look at what I mean from there. But Ravun is just like a cool-ass character design. I think they, like, golden armored titan isn't something we really have in League of Legends. I think it sort of makes him like an anti-Mordekaiser almost to a certain extent, right? Like a big, heavily armored, non-ghost guy who's wearing golden armor, who's this big, frontliney guy. Like, it's a really cool aesthetic, and I think it would play well with the aesthetic of the Solari as a whole. Leona wants to be going all the way in super aggressive fighting style, and Ravun, I think, would contribute heavily to that fighting style, being another aggressive frontline type champion, in comparison to the Lunari, which are a little more tricksy and a little bit more work around you or stack the deck in my favor, so by the time the fight does start, I already have an upper hand, right? Aphelios does that stuff, and so I think it would then be a good juxtaposition and have the ability to have sort of the two Solari characters synergize in a good amount of way. That said, I think that Ravun has a couple of things that make him less likely to be added to League of Legends. First, we already have a spear and shield fighter in League of Legends in this form, Pantheon. Ravun could be like a beefier, tankier kind of guy versus Pantheon, but still, we have done that weapon combination before. This isn't a deal breaker, of course. Garen has a sword, Fiora has a sword, Riven has a sword. They all feel different, but it is still a consideration. The other issue is I think that there's not much mechanically on Ravun's card that could translate into League of Legends. Ravun is mostly just a daybreak enabler. He just says, it's always day, and maybe I replace myself with a card when I come down if I'm played on a daybreak trigger. And that's kind of all he does. So I'm not super keen on him in League of Legends. I don't think there's very much that Riot could do. They'd have to invent a kit for him wholesale. But otherwise, I think he would still be a very cool character design to have in the game regardless. My next candidate is Cythria, which, of course, everyone is familiar with Cythria by this point. If you're not, she was a card originally released in the first expansion for Legends of Runeterra, and she actually had 3 individual cards detailing her sort of rise to fame and power in the Dauntless Vanguard. And none of these, I think, particularly make for good champion designs. Even Cythria the Bold, which is her, like, closest to champion design back when that set came out, it was close, but she was just like a sword-wielding warrior. There's really nothing with that design that would tell me in particular, yes, this is a champion card. However, a couple of sets down the line, Riot introduced Cythria, Lady of Clouds, as sort of a 4th level for Cythria. And Lady of Clouds is like as close to a champion power level as you can get without being a champion. She's like a 10 cost unit. She doubles your health and power of all your guys when she comes down. She's like extremely powerful and has been a part of like a really janky combo deck a while back. And I think that this makes Cythria Lady of Clouds a very interesting candidate because I think that there are some things you can do with that design. The other reason why Lady of Clouds I think would work is because she's a winged cavalry champion. Right, and we've had cavalry champions with Sejuani and Hecarim, and we've had winged champions with champions like Kayle and Aatrox, but we've never had a winged cavalry champion, right? Someone riding a Pegasus, or in this case, a Demacian Silverwing, into battle. And I think that would be a really cool aesthetic that Riot have yet to do, right? You can make Cithria, Lady of Clouds, into this sort of skirmishing, very quick-moving fighter who can fly in, do a bunch of damage, and then fly out, and potentially have like a big rally effect to let the team know when it's time to go for the team fight. That said, there are a couple of issues. First is representing Cithria in League of Legends. Mostly this has to do with character design and intended role. Cavalry characters tend to be tanks because they have to be very large to represent not only the mount, but also the person mounted on the mount. And if you have a winged character, that's even more design space. This is one of the reasons why Kayle's wings got significantly smaller, and if you look at Kayle's body, even in comparison to other champions, you'll notice she's extremely small, and it's because her wings have to take up the vast majority of her character model in-game in order to keep her small enough to still be a DPS character, but also large enough to represent what she's got going on physically. A winged cavalry character has wings, a mount, and a rider. And that's a lot of visual space, and I don't think Cithria, Lady of Clouds lends herself very well to being a frontliner, and so I think Riot would have to try very hard to figure out a way to make that all fit. And again, I don't think any of her previous forms work very well, so you're stuck with sort of this concept. So I like the idea. I want Cithria in League of Legends at some point, but I think Riot are going to have to really spend some time figuring out how to do flying cavalry members in order to make Cithria, Lady of Clouds work, but I think if they can figure it out, she'd be a windmill slam for League of Legends. My third candidate is Commander Ladros, which Ladros even originates back from before Legends of Runeterra came out. He was originally in a story with Callista as sort of he was in love with Callista back before the Ruination, and he's trying to break her out of her funk in being the Spirit of Vengeance, and he does fail, but Ladros nor Callista were like destroyed or otherwise like messed with in that story, so Ladros is still around, and he's cropped up time and time again. He's been in Legends of Runeterra, he's been in Ruined King, the RPG, and I think that, and he's even made an appearance in the Ruination novel as one of the sort of minor characters of the story. And as a result of this, I think that there is plenty of backstory justification for Ladros being added to League of Legends. He's been around in the lore for ages, and he theoretically has champion-level power, so I think he would make a good candidate. The reason I say champion-level power is because his card in Legends of Runeterra is a house. He halves your opponent's life total when he comes down, as well as just puts himself back in your hand every time he dies, so he's hard to remove, and he just keeps having their health total. Like, that's a powerful dude, and I think that people would then see Commander Ladros added to League of Legends and say, oh, I get this guy. He's also the King's Shield, which is a cool title to have, and it ties him in with Viego. I could even see him being introduced as sort of a tanky supportive character. He's the King's Shield, after all. He's supposed to protect Viego, and this would then maybe fit him in as like an aggressive or protective type support like Braum. Then he could be played alongside his beloved Callista in the bot lane. There are things you could do there. Ladros mechanically even has a couple of hooks for the designers to consider. They're difficult to work with hooks. He can't just have people's health totals apropos of nothing, but I think that ultimately there is enough there for Ladros that they could probably find a way to translate some of his Runeterra abilities over, and I think that just as a character, he's been around for so long, I would love to see him introduced into League of Legends proper. Next up is Zolani. Arguably, any of the Darkin would make for a good character to be added to League of Legends. I love literally every single one of them. There are some that maybe would be better than others. Ibaros, for example, I just think he's just a fleshy Nautilus, so there's no real reason why Ibaros, I think, would be able to be introduced or should be introduced. But Zolani, I think, is a really cool character, and I wax more eloquent on this in my Darkin video, which I'll have linked down in the description, but Zolani, I think, works very well because she's actually been in the lore prior to us seeing the character. She is described as being an ascended healer. She had issues with the wars that the Emperor was waging, because she was trying to use her ascended powers to heal people. She was opposed to violence, and she likes protecting people. And eventually, when the fall of Shurima happened and all the Darkin sort of started, or the Ascended started becoming Darkin, Zolani's view sort of twisted, and she said, in order for me to save people, I must control everybody. And in order to do this, I will control them using my hemomancy to basically get inside their blood and stop them from doing anything at all. And if I can do this to the whole world, everyone will be safe forever. And it's such a cool, twisted way of looking from a healer's perspective at the world, and I really like what it implies for Zolani and what it means for the character, and I think it just gives her some really interesting character motivations. She's also one of the biggest characters in the current Darkened Saga story. She ends up being the big bad of the plot, who's only defeated by Ryze, actually using world runes for the first time ever. But we don't actually know what Zolani's fate was. We don't know if she was completely obliterated, if she was entrapped, if she was just depowered. We don't know anything. So theoretically, she could still be around and kicking in order for Riot to then add her into League of Legends as a character. Mechanically, I think that there are a few things that Zolani could do. She is a healer, of course, so that immediately posits her as a bot lane support, potentially being similar to Renata Glass, using Hemomancy to not only top up her allies, but also to debuff or depower her enemies, or otherwise mess with them and control them in certain ways. She has her big Darkened Bloodletters, which I think you could use for some really interesting abilities, maybe similar to like Renata Glass's Handshake. I think there's a ton of opportunity here for Zolani, not least of all because she would be a Darkened support, and then we could run a full Darkened composition once the Darkened Dagger character comes out. So I think that there's a ton that Zolani does. I think she would be an excellent addition as a champion in League of Legends, more so than any of the other Darkened that have been since introduced. But I think that Zolani ultimately isn't the best candidate for champion from Legends of Runeterra, because we have a champion in Legends of Runeterra who's not in League of Legends. Of course, I'm talking about Nora. Nora is what I like to call a smoking gun character. Riot is in the habit of adding characters to champion backstories, sort of offhandedly, and then leaving open the option of, if that champion is popular, of bringing that character from their backstory out into the game proper. They first did this with Senna, who was originally just a fridged wife in Lucian's backstory, and they've proceeded to do it with numerous other characters as well, such as Kai'Sa and Yone. But ultimately, I think that Nora was added to Yumi's backstory as one of these smoking gun characters. I actually thought she was going to come out significantly earlier than she was eventually revealed to us. I thought she was going to be the character that eventually became Vex. But fundamentally, I think that there's still a lot of people who want Nora in League of Legends. There are a couple of hoops to jump through. Her Legends of Runeterra design is mostly focused around portals, which are all completely random, so you couldn't really do that in League of Legends, at least as far as the portal mechanic works in Legends of Runeterra, but you can certainly do it as a mechanic where she opens portals for movement for her allies. Maybe she opens portals and damage comes out of it. Maybe she opens a portal to extend the range of ally skill shots. This is actually a mechanic that Riot initially had on Vex's kit that they eventually took away. There are definitely things that I could see Riot try to do with Nora that I think could be really, really cool. They would just have to figure out what those are, but I think from the character perspective, there is so much about Nora that I think would make her just such a good introduction to League of Legends, and one that a lot of players want to see. But you guys left on the know which characters you want to see from Legends of Runeterra be introduced into League of Legends down in the comments section below. If you agree with my choices, or if there's maybe one of your favorite characters that I've missed, let me know all that down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.